Today, we're hunting for the ugliest, cheapest table we can find and turning it into priceless fine furniture. I love these projects for the challenge, the problem solving, and the way a junk table can be transformed into something you would never expect. To push my skills even further, I'll be using hand tools to create my first ever Kumiko pattern made up of hundreds of tiny pieces. If you're not familiar with this beautiful Japanese woodworking technique, then you are in for a treat. You'll get a peek into my design process and ideas you can steal for your own builds. And this video is brought to us by Squarespace. Here we go. This adventure starts off at my local Salvation Army, and I don't usually have a plan when I go into a thrift store. I'm just looking for something that catches my eye. And this old beat up table right here seems to be perfect for this project. It's only $7.99, so let's take it back to the studio and see what we can do with it. It has so much potential. I love that it's all beat up. I love that the glass inserts pop right out. In the last video, I asked for your input on what I could do with this, and we are gonna implement some of those ideas. So let's get started. Why don't you use hand tools more? Well, there you go. I was getting ready to hammer the top off, and Daniel was like, aren't they screwed on? That dude don't know nothing. Haha. Ah yeah, just a little bit of glue. This was exactly what I was hoping for. I was wondering why there were staples in there, and then when I cut the end off, I can see why. This is a whole separate piece that I'm gonna pop off. My original plan for this ugly table was to make it not so ugly. But when I asked for your opinion in the previous video, so many people said to turn it into a wall hanging cabinet. And I gotta thank you for getting me out of my own head, because that is the transformation that we're going to do today. So in the meantime, I'm squaring everything up and getting most of the original finish off. Originally, these decorative lines were at the bottom of the table. I am going to bring them up so they're closer to the door. And then this corner piece stuck out 1/4 of an inch here and 1/4 of an inch here. I think since we're making it into a cabinet, I want to make it a little bit more flush like that. I decided to cut the cove off, and I might do a little decoration there in a little bit, but the cove, the inside of the cove was all nasty and dirty, and they weren't all centered, and that was bothering me. So I got rid of that. We're down to just the plain pine, and I am going to work with that. And instead of making it flush, I am going to have a little bit of a reveal, maybe an 1/8 inch instead of a 1/4 inch like before. Originally, this was all held together with dowels, which is a fine joinery technique. I am going to use splines just because it's quicker and easier, and I can move on to the more creative stuff. I'm also putting a rabbet on the back so I can add a panel, because this is going to be a wall cabinet thanks to you guys. Now the real fun begins. This was the tabletop that I'm cutting in half at the bandsaw. That will now be the 2 doors for this cabinet. I then take it over to the joiner to clean up an edge, and then we have to cut it down on the table saw because it is too big. When it was a tabletop, it had an inch overhang that needs to be cut off. And having a drum sander in the studio is an absolute luxury, especially when I need to sand off all that old finish. I wasn't planning on edge banding these, but when we trimmed the doors down, we exposed some joinery dowel holes. So I pulled some walnuts out of the closet that we're gluing down to the outside edges, and is gonna add a little bit of decorative oomph to it. It kind of matches the stained part that is exposed on other pieces, which is why I chose walnut.
Or because you always use
Or because I always use either or. Either or. Does it matter why I chose walnut? No. I was planning on routing out this indent here and filling this with some cool stuff we're gonna do a little bit later, but I kind of like the way it looks with the walnut, because these are looking pretty darn good. So we've got the pine, we've got the stained pine, and then we got the dark walnut. And the front edge of the cabinet has these holes that we need to cover up as well. This is one of those situations where we're making game time decisions at game time, which is when you make game time decisions at game time. I was gonna take the glass from the table and cut these down to use it as the shelves. And I tried to score it with my glass scoring knife, and it didn't even leave a mark. And I went over it twice. So this has to be tempered, and you can't score and break tempered glass like you can with any other glass. So we need a plan B. And plan B means using some orange acrylic that I had lying around. Now I need to route the grooves to hold the shelves. Of course, this would have been easier to do before putting everything together, but when you're working without a plan, sometimes this stuff happens. And I think my router jig setup here is pretty legit. I have been putting this off for so long. In the previous video, I said I've got all the equipment that I need to get started with Kumiko woodworking. I just haven't done it yet because my chisels are dull and I haven't had time to sharpen them. You know how we put up these little barriers. When you guys were giving me suggestions on what to do with this thrift store table, so many people said you have to replace the glass with Kumiko. You've been putting it off for way too long. This is the time. You're right. You were so right. Well, you know what? My chisels are now sharp. Today is the day. Johnny from JT Woodworks sent me his Kumiko sled and his Kumiko starter kit, which has all the jigs that you need to make Kumiko woodworking projects. Of course, you can make all the jigs yourself. They're not that complicated, but as I have said many times, I would rather make projects than jigs. So I drew this up in Adobe Illustrator and I am going to try my hand at this. Now, I am not going to get into the details of how this works because JT Woodworks already has videos on this subject. I can't teach it better than he can. He is the master at it. So he does suggest that you work with basswood for your first project because it's a hardwood, but it's soft enough where it compresses enough to go together. I'm not real good at taking on instructions, so I am making mine out of walnut. I like to do things the hard way. Let's climb up to the ladder to the highest diving board and just dive right in. No baby steps. Let's do it the hard way. Here we go. So this is the easy part. This is the stuff that I know how to do, and that's cutting all the thin pieces that are going to be used for these Kumiko panels. They need to be the exact thickness of my blade, which will make more sense here in a little bit. So I'm using my thin rip jig here in the table saw, and I'm just making a guess on how many I'm going to need. I'm counting on me messing up quite a few since this is my first time with Kumiko. I'm starting out by making the grid that's going to hold everything together, and this is where Johnny's sled comes in. There's a little metal indexing pin that's going to allow me to create equal spacing, which is going to hold all the pieces. And the reason this is so important is I will be dealing with hundreds of tiny little pieces, and I don't want to cut to fit hundreds of tiny little pieces. So each section, in theory, should have the exact same size pieces. Now, I love woodworking, but tedious work is tedious work. I got the frames all put together. Look at that. That is so cool. That would work great just like that. So now we're gonna cut all the little pieces for the inside. The longer pieces, I have already cut the length, and then that is where these jigs come in handy right here. They have a very precise angle on here, and then there is a stop so you can trim your pieces to the exact length. I've already got my 45-degree jig set up. So I set my piece inside the jig, and then I just take my chisel and I just kind of chisel away until we get flush with the front edge of this jig. The very first one is the hardest. Flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. And then put your thing down, flip it and reverse it. And when your chisels are sharp, it's actually pretty easy. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a 45-degree point on both sides. And it is so satisfying when you cut them to the perfect length and they slide. You hear that? You hear that? That's thunder. That means we're doing a good job. Oh, that is so satisfying. This is actually the easy part. The hard part is yet to come. So there's 368 pieces total between the two panels, and it might seem complicated with the different angles, but it's really not once you break it down into steps. You just gotta have patience. Where I don't have patience is maintaining and updating my website. And thanks to today's sponsor, I don't have to worry about that because Squarespace simplifies the whole process for me. And I'm gonna tell you about Squarespace while I'm making the remaining 300 pieces. I've been using Squarespace for well over 10 years. I think it's over 11 years now. It simplifies my life, it simplifies my business, and I used to be a web developer for a living. I know what it takes to make a good website, and Squarespace checks all those boxes. And now, if you're setting up a brand new website, Squarespace makes it insanely easy. You're just gonna answer a few questions, and while doing so, Squarespace is going to make your website in the background. And then you just replace the photos and text with your photos and text. Squarespace templates are absolutely beautiful. I'm using one of their default templates myself. And just because you're using a template doesn't mean you can't make it look like yours. You can go in and you can modify colors, you can rearrange things, all by dragging and dropping. And when you're done, your website is going to look beautiful on phones, tablets, and desktop because it's going to reformat itself to fit those screens. That's called responsive design. And when I used to make websites for a living, that was a pain in the behind. Setting up a store is a breeze, and if you want to take payments in person, you can do so with the Squarespace app, so all of your income is coming into one central place. Visit squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, visit squarespace.com/makesomething for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for making these videos possible. Now that the Kumiko panels are done, we're going to insert it into the doors that we cut earlier and finish this guy up.
that's where you live.
I mortised out the hinges, added my favorite finish, and placed in the shelves. Like many projects that aren't planned, sometimes you don't know when you've crossed the finish line. I thought this would be it, but I didn't like how you could see through the Kumiko doors, so I added a backing, and I am glad I did because it looks so much better both inside and out. So again, I thought I was done, but then I had another idea. This was supposed to be something that you would mount to the wall, but I decided I would rather have it stand up on its own, so I made a base out of walnut, cut up some feet from the original legs, and attached it to the bottom. And while I'm finishing up these last few details, I'd like to thank my top Patreon members this month: Jonathan Ransom, Jim from Wiser Beast, Ron from Gnomeworks, Jason Ramos, Tom, Jeremy Johnstone, and Andy from P10 Workshop. Patreon members get behind the scenes videos, monthly coupons, access to all my Fusion files, which I don't sell publicly, and we all get to hang out every day on our private Discord. If you'd like to join us, there will be a link down below. I have done a lot of these thrift store upcycles, and this has to be by far the biggest transformation. It's hard to believe that this is an $8 crappy beat up end table. One of the reasons I like these projects so much is it forces me to think differently. I never would have drew this up on paper. If you want to teach yourself to be more creative, try remixing some old furniture. Creativity is just problem solving, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. I did experiment with 3D printing some inserts that would pop into the squares right here, but I decided that I did not like it, so I didn't execute that idea. I will be giving this away in person September 6th in Boston, Massachusetts. If you don't know, I have an audio podcast with Jimmy DeResta and Bob Claggett. And on September 6th, 2025, we will be recording a live version of the podcast in front of an audience for episode number 500. Tickets are free, but you do need to register. I hope to see some of you there. That is going to wrap it up. As always, be safe, have fun, stay passionate, and remake something. That came out pretty good.